Listener discretion is advised.
The three entered the home, and the TVs in the house were all on, static, and turned to max volume. The sound of the static was radiating through the corridors. The daughters expressed how the TVs were not like that when they fled. Frank, with his daughters in tow, walked up the stairs. They peered into Annie's bedroom, and on the wall was the message, "Marry me."
Hello everyone, welcome to Scary Time. Today's featured podcast is Lullaby, the Fear Podcast. I'm Greg, the host and curator of Scary Time. Every week I find a scary or paranormal episode that I think you will love from an independent podcast creator. If you would like to support my efforts connecting listeners with independent scary and paranormal podcasters, please consider buying me a coffee. After all, Scary Time mostly runs on coffee. Just go to buymeacoffee.com/indie drop-in, and I'll put that link at the very bottom of the episode description. Lullaby, the Fear Podcast, is a deep dissection into the dark psychology of the most dangerous serial killers and horror. Sweet dreams. If you like today's episode, please click the link in the episode description to subscribe to Lullaby, the Fear Podcast. We are going to get this show started after a quick word from our sponsors.
Begin.
It has been established that persons who have recently died have been returning to life and committing acts of murder.
You believe in ghosts?
The first simply disappeared. The other two died.
Hello, my pretties. 2022! New year, new you. Because we love when people say that. It's your host, Ashley Lana, your certified nightmare prescriber, welcoming the fear cult into the year of 2022. New season of Lullaby. I've got some dark, twisted shit. And see, I even swore about it right off the hop. I'm not holding back. I'm so excited. I did not even hold off my swearing. And that was my resolution. I was gonna chill out on the trucker language. But when I think that I speak like a trucker, I remember that my friends are substantially worse. So thanks guys, I'm rationalizing with you. So how were your holidays? Of course, I hope that they were filled with positive memories that will manifest the positivity of the new year. And remember, when you're feeling like your life sucks, remember, it could get worse. It could. Let's wormhole here. You could end up in prison for a horrific crime, and me, Ashley Lana, your host, would attempt to delve into your dark psychology to understand why you are a certified fucking fruitcake, and now your life is a volume of Lullaby. There you go. And if your life really sucks, it might be a two-parter. See, there we go. But we don't want that. Fear cult, we do not want that. Ixnay on the crime life, okay? We do not want that. We are not glamorizing crimes. We are just trying to understand them. So, be good, be you, 2022, new you. So, with that being said, welcome to Lullaby. This is season 2 of Lullaby. Last year's last episode was on the dark history, the battle, and the escape of Alcatraz. And Fear Cult, you loved it. Thank you so much for your comments over social media. It was amazing. Thank you so much. Now, in my office, I have a filing cabinet. And in this filing cabinet, it is separated into categories of true crime cases that I have studied in the past. Then, I have a folder of case files that I plan to explain within a month for Lullaby episodes, but I have them in no particular order. But this episode, I am very excited for. So back in December, when I was choosing which cases to do, I had a Fear Cult member, and he is a former criminal defense attorney named Brad. Hey Brad, hey. And he hosts the Killin', Missin', Hidden podcast. Now, he reminded me of this case, and because of that, it moved straight to the top of my list. This case is absolutely insane, and I'm doing it to start the new year off because it's creepy as hell, and I was able to find factual investigation details. Because this case is so creepy, there are many variations that have circulated on the internet, but of course, my listeners, you guys know by now that I need more than just hearsay. So I researched into the town's archives, the court transcripts, and the investigation files, and found multiple case articles of the actual crime itself. So be prepared, because this episode is going to take a little bit of a topsy-turvy turn, but I'm not going to tell you when it's going to happen. So get comfortable, because sweet dreams are made of these. The following story contains subject matter involving graphic descriptions of murder, mental health, and sexual assault. Please take into consideration that some topics may be disturbing for some listeners. Listener discretion is advised. The two sisters, Annie and Jessica, sat eating popcorn as they watched television late into the night. The family had recently suffered the loss of their mother, and it was taking a toll on the two teenage girls. Every night, they would speak into the room, hoping that their mother's spirit would respond.
Hello?
Then the tapping began.
I'm here.
The older daughter, Annie, stood up and excitedly rushed out of the room. She came back with a box in her arms. The two girls then scurried down into the basement, knowing that their father could be home within the hour. They had no intention of getting caught. The first time the girls performed a seance with the Ouija board, soon after, the presence entered their house. The sisters finally made contact with their deceased mother. Or so they thought. The sisters lit the candles and sat around the board. Placing their fingers on the planchette, they began asking the spirit questions. It responded with tapping. The tapping came from the walls. The girls stopped using the Ouija board entirely at one point.
I'm here.
Because the tapping was unprovoked. Objects in the house began moving around and becoming misplaced. The television would turn on and off, and the tapping soon became loud banging. The spirit inside their house was no longer friendly. It became a completely different entity entirely. This is the true crime story of the real Nightmare on Elm Street. In 1986, in the quiet American town of Pepperell, Massachusetts, lived Frank Andrews and his two daughters, 16-year-old Annie and younger sister Jessica. The Andrews family was experiencing hardship due to the recent loss of their mother to cancer. Frank was thrown into single parenthood and was forced to work long hours to support his daughters. The death of their mother only brought the two girls closer together. While their father was working, they would watch movies, cook dinner together, and play games with the intent of distracting from their loss. Annie would stare at photos of her mother and tell her how much she missed her, promising to never forget her. It was a daily ritual for Annie. As time passed, the grieving never faltered, and Annie decided for her mental health that she needed to start focusing on her future. As a teenage girl, the thought of having a boyfriend was an exciting idea. Annie would discuss with her friends about the boys that she had crushes on, and she would dress to impress. One night when Annie was in her bedroom, the phone rang. She had an idea of who it was. Feeling shy and nervous, she answered. The family phone had been getting calls from a young boy who had a mutual friend with Annie from school. He introduced himself as Danny. He confessed that he was shy but wanted to get to know her because he had seen her before and had developed a crush on her through the mutual friend. Annie was intrigued. The two began talking routinely over the phone, describing common interests and hobbies. Over time, she developed a trust and friendship with Danny. Danny was that tall, blonde, and attractive 16-year-old teen who played sports at his school. He was popular, but despite being popular, he was very shy. He spoke to his friend about how he was attracted to a girl named Annie, and discovered that they were mutual friends. But he had no way of contacting her without approaching her, and to do so, he was terrified. His friend informed him that he could give him her phone number so that he could call her. Then once they were both comfortable, they could meet in person. Danny hesitated, knowing that it wasn't the most ideal way to introduce himself to a girl that he had a crush on. However, he had to take his shot. When he finally got the courage to call Annie, he was worried that she would reject him. The first couple times that he called her, she was either not home or no one answered. This night when he called her, she answered. Hello?
Hello, may I speak to Annie?
This is Annie.
Oh, cool. a part of me wasn't expecting you to answer.
Who's calling?
I'm Danny. I got your number from a mutual friend that we have. I hope it's alright that I called you.
Yeah, it's alright. Why are you calling me?
Why? I wanted to meet you, but I'm not great at this.
Neither am I.
That's great. I'm not alone.
Annie already knew that a boy had been calling the house for her, so she was waiting for this moment to happen. The two laughed and continued talking. Jessica, Annie's sister, was happy seeing that her sister was not feeling depressed about the death of their mother. This was needed. Jessica Andrews was younger than Annie. She would try to talk to her mother's spirit too, in hopes that she could communicate, but nothing ever responded. When Annie wasn't on the phone with Danny, she spent her time with Jessica. The two thought of reaching out spiritually with a Ouija board for their mother, and that was the next step to open a possible gateway. One night, the two sisters decided to go down into the basement and try the Ouija board. They lit candles and placed their hands on the planchette. After reciting the incantation, they waited. But nothing happened. Their father, Frank Andrews, had come home from work and had been wondering where his daughters had been. When he came downstairs and slammed the door open, they quickly hid the Ouija board. Their father knew nothing of what they were doing. Within a couple days, Annie was continuing her routine of speaking to Danny on the phone. During one conversation, Danny worked up the courage to ask her on a date to the town's fair. Annie gladly accepted. She quickly rushed and told her sister. The two discussed what outfit she was going to wear and what rides her and Danny were going to go on the fairgrounds. When the day arrived, Annie got cleaned up and walked to Annie's house. He nervously fixed his hair and straightened his shirt. He stepped up to the door and brought his hand up to knock. This was it. When Annie heard the knock, she rushed down the stairs with butterflies in her stomach and opened the door. There he was. This was the moment both of them had been looking forward to for weeks. Danny smiled wide and stared at Annie. She was just as beautiful as he recalled. When she laid eyes on him, she stood in awe. Danny, the tall, blonde, attractive athlete that finally asked her out, did not exist. The teenage boy that was standing in front of her was not the person he described on the phone. He was short, untamed eyebrows, greasy, messy hair, and his face was pockmarked and covered in acne. This wasn't the self-proclaimed athlete. This boy was a liar. Gone were the butterflies in Annie's stomach. But she was a sweet girl, and she reminded herself that she did commit to the date with him, even if he lied to her. The date started off rather uneventful and awkward. Annie and Danny walked, and she opened up about her family and the recent death of her mother. Then a spark of interest lit up in Danny's face. He became animated and started bombarding Annie with questions about her mother. He asked how badly the cancer affected her, how the death affected the family, and if the family was truly happy. After an hour, Annie decided she could not spend another minute with him. She politely expressed that it was time for her to go, and that she was going to go home and make dinner with her sister. Danny acknowledged that Annie had to leave and said goodbye. It was not the appropriate time in her life to be dating, especially with a boy who lied to her from the start. He watched as Annie walked off, and he decided to go home himself. Weeks had passed, and Annie and Jessica were spending time at home when they decided they should try a seance again. They expected nothing, since nothing happened the first time, so they brought out the Ouija board and went into the basement. The girls lit the candles and got ready to begin the ritual. Since nothing was happening, the girls stopped taking the seance seriously. They decided to stop in fear of being caught again by their father and getting into trouble if they got caught with a Ouija board. Later that night, while laying in their beds, Annie rolled over to face the wall when the sound of tapping quietly rattled the walls. She wondered if the seance truly worked this time. Was the spirit of their mother really reaching out? Jessica quietly knocked on Annie's door and entered, asking if she heard the tapping as well. For the rest of the night, the two sisters were excited. They spent their time asking the spirit to respond to their questions by tapping on the walls. Their father was asleep, and the girls told the spirit that they had to stop in fear of waking him. Then the tapping stopped. Weeks had passed, and Annie and Jessica felt happiness knowing that they were able to contact their mother again. They refused to tell their friends in fear of sounding insane. Late nights were spent with the Ouija board seances, and the tapping and responses on the walls throughout the house occurred nightly. Since their father Frank worked long hours, he never experienced any of these events. Or he was exhausted and he was sleeping in his bedroom and never woke up. A month or so had gone by, and the excitement surrounding communicating with the ghost of their mother became darker. The tapping on the walls became loud bangs. The entity was no longer peaceful and understanding. It wanted their attention constantly, all throughout the day and into the night. With the walls constantly rattling at night, the Andrews sisters were no longer sleeping. The spirit the sisters invited into their house was not the ghost of their mother, but a much darker and evil entity. Items in their house were found knocked on the floor or in a different location entirely. Doors were being slammed, lights were turning on and off. It was at this point Annie and Jessica had to tell their father. They were terrified. When their father Frank came home, the girls explained that they performed seances in the basement with a Ouija board trying to contact their mother. What they brought into their house was trying to scare them. Frank explained to his daughters that their minds were playing tricks on them and that their mother was dead and was not coming back. This was just grieving. It was natural. Since he never experienced the banging himself, he didn't believe his daughters at all. It was a quiet evening in December of 1986 when Annie and Jessica were home alone when the tapping began. The sisters looked at each other. This time, the sound was not coming from the walls around them, but from below, in the basement. Annie then grabbed a knife from the kitchen, and with her sister, the two creeped down the stairs. The light flickered above as they peered into the cold concrete basement. It was then their eyes fell upon a message written on the wall in what appeared to resemble blood, saying, "I'm in your room. Come find me." The two sisters fled the basement screaming. They picked up the phone crying and called their father. Frank rushed home and found his daughters by the front door terrified. Their father called the police, and when the police arrived, they searched the house, and nothing was discovered. The writing on the basement wall was confirmed to be ketchup, and the police informed Frank that his daughters probably scared themselves and were looking for attention. He believed that because he was not home much, that his daughters were looking for a way to reconnect with their father. The two girls were then scolded for their behavior, and were told if they continued, he would have them see a therapist. The night ended with the police leaving, and Annie and Jessica being grounded. It was in December of 1986 when the paranormal activity that was disturbing the Andrews sisters had stopped. It felt like a shroud was removed from the home. Annie and Jessica were happy again, and they did not think about even touching the Ouija board. It had been 2 weeks since the incident with the message on the wall. It seemed everything was back to normal, until one night on December 8th, 1986. While the girls were watching a movie, this time they heard the bang from upstairs. The two got off the couch and proceeded into the kitchen to grab a knife. They snuck up the stairs and heard the bang again. It was coming from Annie's bedroom. With fear, Annie pushed the door open, and on the wall, written in the same form, was the note, "I'm back. Find me if you can." Annie and Jessica sprinted out of the house screaming. They ran to their neighbors and called their father. When their father answered, he was irritated and already tired of their antics. Frank came home and met his daughters. The girls told him of the second message. The three entered the home, and the TVs in the house were all on, static, and turned to max volume. The sound of the static was radiating through the corridors. The daughters expressed how the TVs were not like that when they fled. Frank, with his daughters in tow, walked up the stairs. They peered into Annie's bedroom, and on the wall was the message, "Marry me." Frank Andrews glanced into the room, and he seen something move. Standing near the corner of the room by Annie's bed was a short, skinny teenage boy wearing a blonde wig with messy makeup and in the wedding dress of Frank's deceased wife. It was 16-year-old Danny LaPlante. Danny LaPlante was found and arrested 2 days later, living inside the walls behind Annie's closet. A hole was discovered in the basement behind the dryer that Danny used to enter the walls of the house. He was able to crawl through the walls of the old house and stare through the vents, and he created peepholes, which is how he was able to know when their father left for work and the girls were alone. A crawl space was discovered behind a bookcase, and inside it was food wrappers, a sleeping bag, flashlights, articles of clothing that belonged to the Andrews sisters and their deceased mother. After his arrest, Danny LaPlante was sent to the Department of Youth Services Detention Center until October 9th in 1987, where he spent 10 months. It was at this time when the courts determined that he should be charged as an adult for his crimes. Since he was now being tried as an adult, it meant he could post bail. His mother mortgaged their house and paid the $10,000. He was free to leave jail until his trial. Daniel J. LaPlante was charged with 4 counts of armed assault in a dwelling, armed burglary, breaking and entering, and malicious injury to property and kidnapping. He was due in Middlesex Superior Court on December 11, 1987. Now my fear calls. I'm curious if you caught the small piece of case information that I did when I was reviewing this case last year. Okay, stay with me here. The case file reports that Daniel LaPlante was charged with 4 counts of kidnapping and assault and other crimes. But why would it be 4 counts if all the versions of this crime on the internet say that it was only Frank Andrews and his 2 daughters? That's 3 victims, not 4. Unless there was another person at the house at the time of this event. You will see how this small little detail was critical in solving the urban legend portion of the Daniel LaPlante case. I started delving deeper into the case because if you go online, the version that I just told you is what you're gonna find, give or take some fabricated details to make the story more interesting. Okay? So because of that little detail that I found when reading his actual trial, I knew that this was gonna bust the urban legend portion of the case, okay? So sit back, my listeners. I will tell you the real case, the one about the real family held hostage by Daniel LaPlante that has no internet myths entangled in it, the true story told by the real Frank Bowen and his 2 daughters, Tina and Karen. This information I am going to tell you I collected from the Boston News interviews and police documentation from December of 1987. Here we go. Daniel J. LaPlante was born May 15, 1970 in Townsend, Massachusetts. Common reports explain that he lived a rough life and was emotionally and sexually abused by his stepfather. According to Daniel LaPlante's attorney, Daniel's mother Elaine Moore and stepfather David were, quote, LaPlante came from a caring household where he lived with his mother Elaine Moore, his stepfather, and several brothers and sisters. They were both salt-of-the-earth kind of people. The LaPlante family lived in a simple, dull, blue, wood-framed house on Elm Street. The neighbors watched little Daniel grow up playing in the forest behind his house. A neighbor by the name of Elaine Aho told the police, quote, when you see Danny, you watched him. He earned his reputation. He was a troublemaker from day one. When Daniel LaPlante was 6 years old, a woman named Jill Jerry and her husband hired him to pick stones from their field where they grew pumpkins. One day, Jill witnessed Daniel purposely smashing all the pumpkins and squash that filled their garden. That quickly got Daniel fired, and the story spread around Townsend, Massachusetts. The community early on pegged Daniel as the boy, the problem child. Daniel attended elementary school in Townsend, and then in September 1985, he attended St. Bernard's High School in Fitchburg. This was until June 1986. In high school, Daniel LaPlante was in fact an athlete. He played football and ran track. His grades, though, were mostly C's. The headmaster of St. Bernard's School described Daniel as, quote, students that were close to him said that he was a loner. A fellow classmate recalled Daniel wasn't really that friendly. He never liked to go to parties, and that he never really talked much in school. Okay, let's attempt to understand Daniel for a moment, okay? I couldn't confirm the allegations that Daniel was sexually abused by his stepfather and psychiatrist. Daniel, however, argued in court that his uninformed brain and years of physical and sexual abuse drove him to his actions. It is very important to clarify that not everyone who is a victim of emotional or sexual abuse resorts to criminal activity. We're just discussing. So, Daniel suffered from dyslexia, which was a result for his low grades, and he lost interest in his academics. I can only speculate that his siblings didn't particularly help him either. They were probably busy and had their own lives going on. So this is what we have. Daniel was an athlete, but his peers said that he kept away from all the social gatherings outside of school, and he just didn't talk that much in school. Now, because he resorts to criminal activity and lacks social skills, let's wormhole. So at 16 years old, Daniel felt that he had a lack of control from some form of trauma in his home life, and he disassociated by turning to minor crimes. So the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders defines dissociation as the disruption in the usually integrated functions of consciousness, memory, and identity, or perception of the environment. Now, throwback to Volume 8 of Lullaby, where we discussed Richard Chase, the vampire of Sacramento. He suffered abuse from his father, and he would disassociate to the point of completely becoming a different person. But old Danny boy is very cognitive of his actions, and he was just being a shit disturber for himself. With the idea that Daniel possibly was mentally and sexually abused by his stepfather and psychiatrist, these were supposed to be the people to guide and protect him, but they became his danger, and therefore he felt like he had no control over his life. Now, most studies identify a high prevalence of sexual abuse that begins in childhood as a root determining factor of dissociation disorder. In a way, to escape, he disassociated and began breaking into houses and stealing items that wouldn't go unnoticed so he wouldn't get caught. This was purely for the control thrill. He knew exactly what he was doing. Now, again, not everyone who disassociates resorts to crime, alright? But Daniel, like most criminals, the act would lose its excitement and he would have to progress. He eventually progresses to breaking in and moving furniture around and or stealing items that would be noticed. He would even bring items he owned and he would replace what he stole. Here you go. No harm done. No foul. The Southern California Interdisciplinary Law Journal expresses that there is nothing intrinsic to the psychopathology of dissociative disorders that diminishes criminal responsibility. So basically, with the acknowledgement to dissociative personalities, the punishments of the criminal are made with the attempted understanding of the mental state of the criminal at the time of the crime. From there, the decision is based on the degree the individual could respect the consequences of their actions. We see how in control Daniel was during his crimes and the progression. He disassociated, but he knew exactly what he was doing. Under the light of the street lamps, Daniel would spend his nights prowling around local neighborhoods. He would scout out houses that looked easy to break into. A local variety store was broken into, and Daniel LaPlante and his friend were suspects in the crime. Within the same time frame, 5 houses were reported to be burglarized. All the neighbors suspected Daniel LaPlante. The following is told by the accounts of Frank Bowen, the real father of 15-year-old Tina and 9-year-old Karen. The details I will explain are from the investigation and the story told by Lieutenant Thomas Lane and Officer Stephen Benzinson, who were both retired officers who were at the scene of the Bowen household. The Bowen family had been acquainted with Daniel LaPlante. 15-year-old Tina Bowen had in fact been dating 16-year-old Daniel. The two had gone to the same school and did have mutual friends. The girl's father, Frank Bowen, explained their relationship, quote, "He came to the house on a Friday night, and I took them to the movies. On the following Sunday, which was Easter, he accompanied me and my daughters, Tina and Karen, and their friend Kathy Knapp out for Easter dinner. Then, when my daughter went back to school, she mentioned that she had dated Daniel LaPlante and was told by other students that he was facing rape charges, and that was the end of it. It was after the breakup when Daniel LaPlante began his sick fascination with Tina Bowen. He was hiding in the walls of their house and banging on the walls. The daughters were terrified. They told their father that milk from the fridge was being consumed by an unseen presence. Food would vanish from their plates if they left it unsupervised. The television channels would change when the daughters would leave the room, and items did get moved around. Frank Bowen didn't believe his daughters. He seemed that their stories were outrageous." On December 8th, 1986, Frank Bowen, his 2 daughters, and their 16-year-old friend Karen Knapp came home after a day out. When they noticed that someone had used the toilet and that items were moved around, Frank began searching the house. He found 16-year-old Daniel LaPlante hiding in the closet. But due to his appearance, Frank Bowen was unable to immediately identify who the man was. Daniel LaPlante was wearing a hairy jacket, not the dress of the deceased mother like many stories say. His hair was spiked and his face was painted. He was armed with a hatchet in one hand and a steel wrench in the other. Frank Bowen explained that in a very calm manner, Daniel ordered the 4 into the bedroom. The family and Karen Knapp ran and quickly barricaded the door. Frank then opened the window and lowered Tina to the ground. She then ran to the neighbors and called the police. Daniel LaPlante was not identified by the Bowen family the night of December 8th because of the disguise. Lieutenant Thomas Lane said, quote, "It was also interesting that Frank Bowen described the male as approximately 22 years old. Danny was 16 at the time. Tina had described the male as standing 6 feet tall and being somewhere between 17 and 26 years old. Danny was 5'8". Fear and LaPlante's disguise obviously prevented their recognition of Daniel as the kidnapper that evening. The police arrived and found no one in the house. The Bowen family temporarily evacuated their home after the incident and went into hiding. 2 days later, on December 10th, Frank Bowen returned to 93 Lawrence Street to retrieve some belongings. As he approached the house, he seen a face in the front window, the exact same face that took his family hostage. Officer Stephen Benzinson received a call and drove to the Bowen residence. Officer Benzinson said, quote, "I could tell as I drove up that he, Frank Bowen, was very upset. I could tell as I drove up he was pointing to the house, and I said to myself, here we go. He's going to say that he saw the guy in the window." Officer Benzinson got the key and checked the snow for footprints. There were none entering or exiting the house in the fresh snow. The officer explained how he was unsure if he believed Frank Bowen, but when he opened the door to the house, the situation completely changed. Officer Benzinson said, quote, "When I opened the door, on the right-hand wall I saw a knife sticking out of the wall, and I see it's through a picture, a family picture. Written on it, in magic marker, said, 'I'm still here, come find me.' Now the hair goes up on the back of my head. On the other wall, I saw another picture saying, 'I'm going to kill you all,' with a knife through it. On the table, 2 glasses of wine, not touched." The officer called for backup. Chief David Young and Sergeant Jim Scott arrived soon after. The police searched the home. The officer said, "That little bastard is here. We're missing something." Then he discovered a wall, an area of the wall to hide pipes. Officer Benzinson explained that he knew that there was enough room back there for someone to hide. He had one hand on the butt of his pistol and he leaned in and seen what looked like to be a pile of clothes. Daniel LaPlante had covered himself in a pile of clothing. The officer reached in and grabbed him. He said, quote, "Let me see your hands or I will splatter your brains all over the wall." Daniel LaPlante casually looked at the officer straight in the eye. That is when the officer knew that they were dealing with a psychopath. Daniel's reaction to the gun to his head confirmed Frank Bowen's statement about being directed in a calm manner to go into the bedroom. That was honest truth. Daniel LaPlante was arrested and taken away. The officers investigated the hiding spot of Daniel LaPlante inside the walls of the Bowen household, and I am currently looking at the investigation sketches of the hiding place in the walls, and these were drawn by the investigators. Daniel LaPlante was able to find a triangular space in a corner, bounded on 2 sides by concrete foundation of the inner wall, and by another wall on the third wall, out-facing side, separating the toilet. So this was actually behind a toilet, like a wall built so a toilet could be in the corner of the room, and there was basically room enough for him to hide behind it. And it's so small for anyone to notice. So the space allowed just enough room for him to sit in a crouched position and even sleep behind there, okay? So it was a very small entry to the space, and the manner in which it was accessed could have fooled anyone into thinking that there was no apparent way for any human of any size to climb onto the low foundation and squeeze through the very narrow opening and jump down to the cellar floor. Don't worry, I'm gonna post these sketches on the Instagram page because describing this is very difficult. It's easier to see for you visual learners. So this is really awesome, actually. Like, kudos to these officers, because Officer Steve Benzinson and Lieutenant Tom Lane, they did this engineering experiment and they took measurements of the space, and they were able to determine that a 5'8", 163-pound person could squeeze through an opening 8.5 inches wide. Daniel LaPlante was 5'8", 135 pounds, and he could fit through the opening, and an opening as narrow as 7.5 inches. So for comparison, as wide as like a sheet of loose leaf paper, a standard sheet of paper. So that's where he would sleep and where he would hide in this house. He bunked out here for months. Oh, it's so fucking gross. It's so gross. That's terrifying. Behind the toilet to boot. Like, location, buddy. I bet you he regretted that sometimes. Okay, so now that we know the real event that happened at the Bowen household, aka the Andrews household for the Mythbusters out there, the rest of the Daniel LaPlante story is really easy to follow. Remember, after he was arrested from the Bowen household, he was sent to juvenile detention, and then his case got moved to an adult trial, so he was eligible for bail, and his mother mortgaged the house to pay the 10 grand, so Daniel LaPlante was a free boy. So this is where the story gets intense. 10 months after being arrested, on November 16, 1987, Daniel carefully planned his next intrusion. Daniel exited his house, craving to be in control of his life again. He entered the forest behind his Elm Street residence and began trudging through the forest. He reached the end of the wooded area and stood staring at a house, located half a mile from his house. This was the home of 34-year-old Andrew, 33-year-old pregnant Priscilla Gustafson, and their 2 young children, 7-year-old Abigail and 5-year-old William. He broke into the house when no one was home, and he began stealing possessions. As he was about to leave, he stopped. He turned around and surveyed the house. He began walking around and mapping out the structure. Once satisfied with the knowledge of the home, he left. He was able to obtain a gun that didn't have any ammo. Daniel lied to his brother's friend in order to acquire bullets, and he spent the rest of his day practicing loading and unloading the weapon. It was on December 1st, 1987, less than 2 months after Daniel LaPlante was released on bail. He decided this was the day. He had to have his thrill. He needed to be in control again. Andrew Gustafson was a young lawyer who had just worked a long day at the office. At 3:45 p.m. on December 1st, Andrew was trying to call Priscilla to tell her the good news that he closed a case. He wanted her to hire a babysitter so they could go out and celebrate. He called 3 times. There was no answer. It was after 3 p.m., so Priscilla should have been home by now from picking up Abigail from the bus stop. After Andrew finished up work, he drove home to find Priscilla's vehicle in the driveway. As he entered the home, he noticed that all the lights were off. He called for his wife. Again, no answer. He walked upstairs and called for his wife and children. Nothing. Andrew opened the door to the master bedroom, and he immediately fell back against the door frame. Lying face down on the bed was the body of his pregnant wife. Blood spatter covered the walls. She had been shot in the head 2 times with a .22 caliber handgun, with a pillow covering her head to muffle the gunshots. A used condom was found and proved that Priscilla had been raped. Andrew did not know where his children were, and did not know if the culprit was still inside the house. He rushed to the phone and called the police. 2 officers arrived at the scene and told Andrew to wait outside. They entered the home and began searching for the children. The officer entered the upstairs bedroom and pulled back the shower curtain to see the body of 5-year-old William Gustafson, lying face down in the tub filled with very little water. He was drowned. The officers continued looking for 7-year-old Abigail Gustafson. They found her body in the downstairs bathtub. She had also been drowned. Searching the house, the investigators found no trace of the culprit. Lieutenant Thomas Lane, the officer who was in charge of the Bowen case, was at the Ayer District Court when he heard of the Gustafsons' murder. He said, quote, "My immediate verbal reaction to the news, despite having no facts about the case, was, I wonder what Daniel LaPlante is up to lately." Lieutenant Thomas Lane fully understood the psychology of Daniel LaPlante as a criminal. He was granted a warrant for the arrest of Daniel LaPlante for the Gustafson murders. On December 3rd, 1987, Lieutenant Thomas Lane suited up in his bulletproof vest for the first and last time in his police career. He had an inkling that Daniel LaPlante would not stay near his home on Elm Street. He had a hunch that he would probably head to the forest area surrounding the Pepperell Bowen home. He led a team to the area and distributed photos of LaPlante. Sightings of Daniel LaPlante began immediately. More than 25 officers joined the manhunt for Daniel LaPlante. The news of the murders and the search for LaPlante as the prime suspect reached Frank Bowen and his daughters. Frank pulled his daughters out of school due to the links the other children would have with Daniel and their new home. Frank Bowen had put his house up for sale. It cost him $30,000 to move his family to another town in fear. Frank Bowen told the Boston Globe that he is now, quote, financially broke and emotionally disturbed. He's trying very hard to put the pieces of his family back together. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Thomas Lane had been maintaining the perimeter around the Pepperell Forest. A woman by the name of Lynn McGovern approached and asked him if he could enter her home with her. He contemplated accepting her request at the chance of negatively affecting the containment area, but another hunch told him to follow her into her house. Quickly after entering the house, a loud bang rang out from the upstairs. Drawing his gun and proceeding up the stairs, he seen at the top of the landing a 16-gauge shotgun lying flat on the floor. Lynn McGovern began screaming in terror. Lieutenant Lane called for backup, and an officer responded instantly from the cruiser and pulled up outside. Lynn explained that Daniel LaPlante was upstairs in her house, watching everything with a revolver, shotgun, and a high-powered rifle. Daniel had seen the lieutenant arrive and his backup. With that, he fled. He leapt from the second-floor window onto the garage roof and bolted into the woods. He was gone. Later that night, Lieutenant Thomas Lane and his backup were patrolling Elm Street, the area where LaPlante lived. A woman let out a blood-curdling scream. The officers approached 17 Elm Street. The woman who lived there had seen Daniel LaPlante hiding in her house with a gun. He threatened to kill her if she did not drive him out of town. She explained that she did what he asked, but she jumped from the moving car near Town Hall and fled, finding the officers near her house. Again, Daniel LaPlante had gotten away. Reports came in that they had seen the getaway car in Ayer, Massachusetts. When Lieutenant Thomas Lane informed the officers that LaPlante could be hiding in anything, they searched everywhere. While the officers were searching, they found Daniel hiding in a trash dumpster in the lumberyard. He stuck his head out and tried to make a run for it. But it was too late. 17-year-old Daniel LaPlante was finally behind bars. During the trial, Daniel LaPlante pled not guilty to all 3 charges. He was now 18 years old. He went through a 20-day psychiatric evaluation, and he was deemed fit to stand trial. 50 witnesses were called to testify, including his own family. All the evidence was against him. Daniel's lawyer defended him by explaining that he was sexually assaulted by his stepfather and childhood psychiatrist. Lieutenant Thomas Lane testified at the Gustafson murder trial. His testimony, along with the prosecutors, argued consciousness of guilt. By Daniel running from the authorities, breaking and entering, along with a string of other crimes, and taking a woman hostage to drive him away from the police, the actions appear to be from a guilty person, not an innocent one. He premeditated every crime he committed. Although Daniel's defense claimed that he acted out of disassociation and mental instability. Frank Bowen said, quote, "LaPlante is a clever boy. He is no dummy. He is mentally insane, there is no question in my mind." During the trial, Daniel LaPlante showed no emotion. He acted as though he had no involvement in the murders. Daniel LaPlante eventually admitted to the Gustafson murders. The following is a direct court proceeding quote from the events surrounding the triple homicide in the case of Commonwealth versus Daniel J. LaPlante. On December 1st, 1987, the defendant, Daniel LaPlante, broke into the Gustafsons' house for the second time, carrying a loaded weapon. When he heard Priscilla Gustafson and her 5-year-old son William entering the house, he said that his first thought was to jump out the window, but he decided not to. He confronted them with a gun, brought them into the bedroom, put William in the closet, and tied Priscilla to the bed. The defendant, Daniel J. LaPlante, said that after he tied Priscilla to the bed, his plan was to leave, but once again he decided not to. Instead, he made the decision to rape her. After raping her, he acknowledged that he could have left. Instead, he decided he would kill her. After he killed Priscilla, Daniel J. LaPlante made the decision to take William into the bathroom and drown him. As he was leaving, he encountered 7-year-old Abigail. He lured her into the bathroom and made the decision to drown her as well. After fleeing the scene, Daniel J. LaPlante went home, ate, and then attended his niece's birthday party as if nothing had happened. He was charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder and sentenced to 3 consecutive life sentences. In 1993, Daniel appealed his conviction on the grounds that the search warrants of his home should not have been granted. The evidence found in his room in 1987 proved that he did indeed commit the crimes. Therefore, his appeal was denied. In 2017, 46-year-old LaPlante appealed for a reduced sentence after the Supreme Court ruled that juveniles cannot be sentenced to life in prison without parole. He had been incarcerated for 30 years and wanted his sentence to be carried out concurrently rather than consecutively. This would have made him eligible for parole in 2032 after 45 years in prison. This he was denied. After psychic evaluation, it was confirmed that after 30 years in prison, Daniel J. LaPlante showed no true remorse for his crimes. Gustafson's brother, Reverend William Morgan Jr., said, quote, "I forgave LaPlante, but he must remain locked up. I do not believe that Daniel LaPlante is repentant of his crimes. I believe that he will always be a danger to society and to our children. In my opinion, under no circumstance should Daniel LaPlante be set free." Daniel's psychiatrist said, "Is he rehabilitated? In my opinion, absolutely not." That is the true story of Daniel LaPlante, the real Nightmare on Elm Street. He was a slippery little bastard, wasn't he? He just kept, he was creepy. He was a delusional child who was a power and control-seeking serial killer. That story just freaks me out. The concept of a person who is obsessed with me, living in the walls of my house, watching me take a shower, or watching me walk around in my underwear, or talking to my animals as if they're real people, or, oh my god, this is the worst, cleaning your house, singing every 90s love ballad at the top of your lungs, off key, with someone who is obsessed with you, staring at you, realizing you are not worth it. Actually, that might be it. You guys may have just solved how to prevent someone from finding you attractive if they're living inside your house stalking you. Also, the lovely phone call acting was with my dear friend Captain Cook. Thank you for that. I didn't give him any premise. I said, I'm gonna send you a script and I want you to read it like a 16-year-old nervous little boy. And he's like, okay, I'll do my best. And then, yeah, that's what he gave me. And he's probably listening to this going, you made me a fucking serial killer. You crazy bitch. But then knowing him, he's probably like, I got this. I still got it. Thank you, Chris. It means a lot. He is one of my best friends. BFFs till the end. Yeah. Many tellings of this story online they're fabricated, so it sounds like he was wearing like the deceased wedding dress. Yeah, in the real story, they don't even mention the death of the mother. I think the family was over it. Daniel LaPlante. This guy, he used his crimes to disassociate from his abusive home life, and I personally do not find it far-fetched that a 16-year-old abuse victim who is a psychopath would seek an alternate place to hang out when he's triggered. It is a fact that he is a power control killer and a thrill-seeking side motive. He broke into houses to move objects around, and he resorted to killing because it's so creepy. Yeah, season 2, we're back. Tonight you're gonna hear like your fridge kick in, or like the thermal expansion inside of your fridge pop, and you're gonna be alone and you're gonna run for the baseball bat. But remember, my fear cult, there is no shame in being scared. Especially if there's a serial killer hiding in your walls.
There'll be more, many more. They're coming for me now. And then they'll come for you.
Back on our never-ending quest to find a truly scary movie, our Fear Cult member, the beautiful Noella, hi! She recommended to me to watch the 2011 movie. It's a psychological thriller, Snowtown, which is based on the infamous Snowtown murders in Southern Australia. And I was really excited for this because I know the Snowtown murder case very well. I know it by the name Bodies in the Barrels, which I will do a dissection on at a later date. But since I'm mentioning this film now, I'll let you watch it and then forget about it for a bit, and then we can circle back. And this movie could be like your pre-rec for the future Lullaby episode on Snowtown. So yeah, to give you a briefing of the film, it's based on the 12 murders committed by John Justin Bunting, Robert Joe Wagner, and their accomplices between 1992 and 1999 in the areas of Adelaide, South Australia. The film centers around 16-year-old Jamie, whose mother's boyfriend Yeah, Mother's boyfriend is a self-appointed neighborhood watchman, and with his group of friends, he joins in on a murder spree that tortures and brutally murders 12 people. And it's Snowtown 2011. Check it out. True story. Thank you, Noella, for that one. I enjoyed watching it. Oh yeah, a kangaroo kind of gets butchered in it, so I gave you a warning. I gave you a warning. The YouTube horror short film I'm recommending this week is called Other Side of the Box, written by Caleb J. Phillips and Nick Tagg. It's a Christmas one, so I hope you like it. I thought it was really good. I was watching it with the lights off, as per usual in this household, and my cat came in, and you scared the hell out of me. She's always in here when I record. It's her weird sadistic way of watching me under stress. It's fantastic. So, check out Snowtown and watch the horror short The Other Side of the Box on YouTube. I will link it in the description of the episode. So, I tried to scare you, you tried to scare me. Send me your horror movie recommendations. Please rate and review. Lullaby, the Fear Podcast, is on Facebook, Twitter, Slasher, and Instagram at Lullaby, the Fear Podcast. So join the Fear cult there. And thank you so much for listening to this week's Lullaby. Sweet dreams. Lights out.
Thanks again for listening to Scary Time by Indie Drop-In Network. Check out all of Indie Drop-In's shows at indiedropin.com. If you would like your show featured, reach out to us at Indie Drop-In on all social media or go to indiedropin.com.